What's up, folks? Grant here for Grant Goes Out. I was doing some rendering on a video project, and as I learned more about videos, I learned that I hate rendering. But while I was waiting for that to load, I was reading a little Twitter, following the Bird site, and I found an article from one of my favorite magazines, Outside Magazine. I grew up with Outside. I read it growing up. I read it now. I'm a subscriber. I love Outside, obviously, because my website's called Grant Goes Out. But this article is about used gear, and it's called Tips from the Pros on Buying Used Gear. Subheading, be cautious, but don't let small things scare you away from a deal. Awesome, I think. Kind of annoying because I wanted to write about that, but that's cool. It's good. It's good information. Everybody should be getting that. So they have some things, and I wanted to address a couple of things, kind of point by point. Some of it's great. Some of it's fantastic. The first thing they talk about is don't overlook footwear, and I think that's super killer. Now, I have the pleasure of wearing an 11.5 in European size. That's a 45. It's hard to find used. I don't see it anywhere near as much. My dad's an 8 or an 8.5, whatever. And so he can always get great deals on shoes because there's a ton of people that are 5'8" and wear 8.5 shoes. Well, I'm 6'3" and I wear an 11.5. For those of you playing along at home, you realize why I'm bad at ball sports now. Anyway, if you could find used footwear that's in good shape, get it. You know, especially winter stuff. I think that's a great way to go. You know, they do point out check it for insoles, which I think is awesome. The next thing they say is smell everything. And I think that's a great idea if you can tell what mildew smells like. I can't tell. My wife yells at me all the time. We talk about it a lot. I don't have a great nose for mildew. I can tell if it's like so moldy that it's gonna be dangerous, but I don't always catch that mildew scent. So check that out when you're looking at used gear. Do sniff it, okay? Now don't be afraid of kind of a musty smell. Nylon, like tents and stuff that have been rolled up and stored properly, dry and clean, will have a little bit of a musty smell. Don't let that be the kind of thing that keeps you from buying some used gear. You know. I think it's always a good policy to air stuff out and let it breathe and then roll it back up. And if it's been rolled up for a couple of years, it could be real musty. And it's not mildew. It's just the way nylon and waterproofing smells as it sits in a bag. So don't be afraid of those things, but do smell it. It says don't be afraid of small tears or dirt. Couldn't agree more. You know, especially for the stuff that we're going to put in the dirt and stuff that's going to get dirty because you're going to use it. I don't think you should be worried about it. No one's going to stop by your campsite to make sure that your gear is like just on point, super spick and span clean. In fact, if you're worried about what other people think, they're going to think less of you because your gear is all brand new, you know. There's stuff called tenacious tape that they mention. That's a great way to fix holes in tents, jackets, or packs with no sewing. I'm going to check some of that out. I've just used, duct tape. I'm a little bit too country, I guess. And then they talk about re-waterproofing with Nikwax, which I'm going to do a video on re-waterproofing a tent with Nikwax. As soon as I get enough days in a row without rain that I can set a tent up and clean it, which is kind of ironic and annoying. It says be careful when buying products with down, because down loses its loft and the fill rating doesn't mean anything. I believe that. I don't have any reason to disagree with them. I also don't have anything that has down. I live in a situation where my waterproof cell phone has a waterproof case, and everything I have gets wet sooner or later. I'm just not careful enough, so I've never had down stuff because I'm not careful enough to have down. But yeah, I believe that buying used down, you got to be careful because the loft may not count. If you're just buying it for fashion, cool, but if you're counting on it, may not be the way to go. It suggests bringing batteries and canisters, which I think is super cool that, for testing headlamps or testing stoves. This all presumes that you're going to a used gear store that will let you fire up a stove, which I don't have one of those here where I live. Maybe you do. That's cool. Another thing to think about is, if you're buying something and you're pretty clear on what it is, like a stove, and you've got a canister of 4, 5, 10 even dollar canister of gas, yeah, you could take it with you and just be like, okay, yeah, I want to buy your Pocket Rocket, this used stove, and it's great. Let's fire it up and make sure it works. I think it's an awesome idea and a good way to not get screwed if you have that availability. Batteries for sure take with you. Mentions checking for discoloration on tent poles, because if they've been kinked or bent and then straightened back out, that can be a sign that they're damaged. You know, check those out. I think it's a good thing to look for. I've got a big tent with a slightly bent pole, and it's not been straightened back out, and it still works really well, and I paid like 30% of the original price because of that. So, you know, there's deals to be had. It says avoid certain things. Like helmets, which I get. I bought a used helmet and have been happy with it. I trusted the seller. Maybe I'm a chump for doing that. It's a kayaking helmet, so it's a little bit different. I wouldn't buy a used bike helmet. You know, the climbing gear specifically, they say to stay away from, because you don't know if it's gotten oil and some other stuff on it. I don't know enough about climbing gear to tell you if that's a good idea or not, but it sounds safe. Mentions following shops on social media, and yeah, that's cool. If you've got used gear stores beyond like Play It Again Sports, and maybe even Play It Again Sports has some cool stuff where you are, but here it's mostly used disc golf gear and stuff I don't want. It says buy in person wherever you can. Though there are some reliable websites, and it mentions, North Face, Renewed, Patagonia, Worn Wear, and REI's used section. I think those are great. The REI Gear Closet kind of stuff, because of the REI return policy, and I'm an REI member, but I don't live very close to a store. But you can find some sweet deals on stuff that someone's used once or twice and taken back. I think it's definitely worth looking at. But the next thing it says here is not the stuff on Craigslist, though. You're liable to get hosed. Okay. I feel like that is the kind of thing that someone that lives in the Mountain West can say. I buy a ton of gear on Craigslist, and I encourage you to buy gear on Craigslist. None of this gear that I'm thinking of is life-saving or life-threatening if it fails. It's all gear that you can use to have a good time in the outdoors, but maybe it's not about life and death stuff like halfway up a rock face. To me, like suggesting that you can't buy a used kayak or a used canoe paddle, even a used tent off of Craigslist, I think that's fine. Just check your pricing. I also suspect that they're thinking of stuff that's a couple of years old, and I'm more into stuff that's 20 years old, because that's where my price point is for a lot of things. I find that to be pretty crazy. I just think about, there is a risk, to buying gear that's used that isn't perfect, but come on, give me a break. How are you going to just say, oh, don't buy stuff off Craigslist? Like, what? If I had enough money that I didn't have to buy used gear on Craigslist, that I would just buy new gear, So to me, like saving money by buying used gear only from these, brand resale sites, that's not real, That's like if you only buy used cars from from like the dealership, like the used car division of a major dealership. Like, okay, I mean, yes, you're right. That's probably better, but you're also going to pay for that. So if you're buying a tent to take camping at a state park near your house, you can buy a tent that's maybe a little sketchy and you aren't sure about. Also, you could probably set it up, which I'm not sure if you can do that at those stores, because we don't have any of those, and maybe they've got a great return policy. I don't know, but to me, like I can go meet a guy and buy a tent off Craigslist, and set it up right there in the parking lot and figure out if it's going to be what I want, or if it's what he said it was, or if it's sketchy, or if it's good to go, and then I can take it home. And to me, that's way better than shipping stuff forward and backwards. And I don't get it. I think that's nuts. No, it's not vetted except by you, and not for nothing. If you're buying a tent and you don't know how to set it up, Google it. You probably find a video. But also, like, I mean, how much vetting are we going to do on a raincoat? How much vetting are you going to be able to do on a camp stove? Water purifiers, unless it's one that has a replaceable filter like the MSR, and some of those, you're going to just buy a new Sawyer. I don't know, man. It seems strange to me. Again, I don't know anything about climbing gear. Boats are pretty straightforward, right? Canoes and kayaks, because if there's holes in them, then they don't work. But I don't know outside. I think you're kind of missing with this last point. Good article, but as per usual, we tend towards buying from brands and buying brand new, which is great for those who can and for those who count on that gear to like really make it. But some of us are just weekend warriors. We're just trying to have fun while we can. And also maybe pay rent or pay for our mortgage too. So I don't know outside. I think you're missing on this one. But what do you guys think? Tell me about it down here. Do you have a used gear horror story? Did you buy a pair of mucklucks that gave you foot cancer? Like, what happened to you? Tell me about your used gear stuff. Did you have a big win? What went on? Until next time, I'm Grant for Grant Goes Out. See